Want to earn some quick cash? Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston is stocking up on cute and cozy fall styles. We pay you on the spot for your gently used name brand clothes and accessories. Plus, while you're here, you can stock up on must-have looks for autumn. We're the go-to sustainable shopping spot for teens and young adults. So stop by Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston today and refresh your wardrobe. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Welcome back to the Backyard Gardens podcast, everybody. It is Thursday, and you know what that means. It is time for some gardening talk. And it's, late season, Batavia. I think there's some mistakes that we can all avoid to make for a better garden, don't you think?
I agree. And I have my second wind, by the way.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
That's fast. Doesn't take much, does it?
Well, sometimes more than others.
Yeah. So, the late summer season is a very... we've talked about this recently. I can't remember if it was in a regular show or in the subscriber episodes, which if you want to be a subscriber, you can do so through Apple subscriptions or Patreon. But, you start getting later season, you can start getting complacent and not understanding the change of the season look, we all understand the change of a season, leaves fall, blah, blah, blah. But as far as the effects on the garden, I think we can, stay up to date with that and make our gardens more productive.
Coming out of spring, going into summer, you kind of know, or being in spring and heading into summer, you kind of know it's either going to get much hotter and maybe it's going to be wetter. Like it's pretty it's going to be one or the other thing or both. Like there's all kinds of mixtures of things that you're preparing for when it comes to coming out of summer, going into fall. And I think that especially generally fatigue, which is great that I have my second wind, which may or may not last through this episode. So,
well, this could be short-lived. Well, and, I was thinking about it, too. I kind of paused at the end of what I was saying because my mind was working. But September can be a very tricky month as far as, it can be hot, it can get cold, it can be storms. There can be a lot of things that occur. And, this is when we really start our yo-yo season here. So it's one of those things that we need to stay on top of. Mm-hmm. And thinking about it is, what classifies as a gardening mistake, do you think?
Is it similar to the weed is just something that you don't want growing in a space? So something that you don't want to have happen is a mistake? Maybe not exactly it.
I don't know. I think it's something, obviously that would be a mistake. But I'm in my mind, I'm thinking that my garden wouldn't be as productive as I wanted it to be, or as I had envisioned. I know that I start out every year thinking it's going to be a bang up, knockdown gardening year, and at some point during the year, it just doesn't turn out the way I want. I feel like every year is like that for me. Mm-hmm. Do you have that experience?
Well, I don't know that I've walked away with from a garden season saying everything went according to plan. I couldn't be happier, right? I just don't think that there's so many pieces. I don't think that that's possible. If you're gardening even 3 months, let alone 6 or 7 or 8, I just don't think that that's possible. And that's okay. I have a lot of tolerance and grace to give for that. I think a version that I look at this is if it's something kind of that I knew better about and I did it anyway, or I didn't do it and I knew that I should, I can look at that as a mistake, right? I have been talking for a month about planting, seeding or sowing carrot seeds, and I didn't do it.
Yeah.
That was a mistake. Not really,
well,
not a whole good explanation for it either. Yeah.
And, there's also the mistake that's not out of your control. We just had that hurricane come by and we got 12 or 14 inches of rain. I don't know what the exact number was, but all my parsnip seeds rotted. Mm-hmm. So, it's is it a mistake? I don't know, but it didn't go to plan. So I've got to do something to replace it. And I mean, truth be told, it's not the end of the world if I don't. I mean, I can get the food, but I mean, for me, it's important. If you're listening to a gardening specific show, it's probably important to you as well. Mm-hmm. So I think all of these things classify as a mistake. Anything that hinders your progress or doesn't go according to plan or something that you're just not happy with, I mean, look, if I stub my toe, that's a mistake. I'm just plain not happy about that situation either. So
I'm not going to go that broad because accidents are not mistakes in my mind. I think there has to be some level of intention about a desired outcome. And maybe you've done something counter to that. Yeah. That's a very corporate answer.
It is a very corporate answer. It's a Sunday school answer. It's the right answer. But I mean, so even if it's not an accident, okay, but maybe I'm saying that just to make myself feel better about my current situation. But we get into like late summer mistakes. So these would be like plants that are growing in late summer. They're probably left over or you've replanted. These aren't fall plants. So, the mistakes for these late summer plants. What do you think is your number one mistake that you would make in your garden? It looks like you got nervous when I said that.
No, I was thinking about how I wanted to frame this up. A mistake I've made in the past that I overcame this year is letting a sick plant infect other plants.
Oh, yeah.
Once I dug into it, I found that my last 2 of the 4 or 5 squash plants that I had, I saw powdery mildew. So in the past, I've let that powdery mildew spread to other things. So not only did they have powdery mildew, but once I started moving some leaves around because I thought I was going to prune them this year, I found that they both had like severe squash vine borer damage, so at the decline of those plants, which would have been about a week ago, I said, let me get in there. Yeah. Fortunately, I avoided the mistake this year because I got in there, I feel like soon enough. And ultimately, I pulled those 2 plants. There really wasn't anything to salvage in my mind. The mistake I've made in the past, though, is just putting it off. Not necessarily being overly optimistic. There's a little bit of that, like maybe I could cut some of the powdery mildew away. That's the best method I've had to treat it. And then I could still salvage the plant. So that's the mistake I've made in the past. And it's additional work. There's still some life left in the plant, so it's eating up nutrients in your soil. It again, especially the way that particular disease works, can easily spread to other things, healthy crops.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking you were kind of on the same line as me, but like not treating for pests. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You're getting to the end of the season. You're like, look, what's the point? But I mean, in all reality, you could have another month worth of growing for some of these plants. So absolutely part of it would be, not treating for pests, giving up on that regimen if you have one, or even taking the time to identify them. Mm-hmm. That's something that I've definitely, I've got my, because of all the rain we've had and the weather, I haven't been able to treat. My Seminole pumpkins are ate up right now, and I have every intention this evening of going out there and giving them a good treatment and trying to start that regimen back up to kind of get it under control. But, as you get into the late summer, it's also about adding shade when needed. So we have a lot of very far southern listeners, and that shade can really help to kind of get those plants through this next time frame. And because I know for you, it's like you're starting to cool off at this point, but for some of us, we're still, we can easily be in the upper 90s. Yeah. Some of our hottest weather could still come. It won't be as long, but it'll be like periods of it. And so having like a removable shade cloth or something that you can add at the last minute can really go a long way. And this will also go in for planting for fall.
Yeah, and, a mistake in different terms for that would just be underestimating how hot those temps are,
Exactly. Because we don't want to believe it.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm actually comfortable with, I'm a weird bird now. So I had on sweatpants and a full on kind of like a faux cashmere sweater. So it looks kind of cashmere-like, but it's not cashmere. So it's a thicker sweater. And this was last week in August. And I knew I was on a video saying I'm overdressed, but it was like the hint of cool weather. But I had to protect myself against that coolness. Yeah. Right. You know, so, but also 90 degrees. I keep on saying it's so hot in my garden. It's so hot for me. Right. You know, so I'm in that place where I just have to have that sweet spot of like 76, 77 degrees. Mm-hmm. And I roll my eyes back to say, oh, shoot, I have a tarp on one of my beds because it was raining and it's been sunny all day long. The high today is what, like 73, 74 degrees? Yeah, 73 degrees, but full sun, that's still pretty hot under a tarp. You know? Yeah. So, again, don't use tarps for shade, but really underestimating, you know, how hot is for you in your garden.
Yeah, and I mean, that's right now, so for me, it's 90 degrees today, and we could continue this on, but we're also going to be dropping down, and we're starting to get hints of the cool too. Here and there, we'll get a cooler night or something. When I say cooler, I mean it'll be 69, 72, something like that. But once you start getting those cooler nights, let's say you're starting to get into the low 60s, that shade becomes really important because you get in the 60s at night, the 90s during the day, 90s, high 80s. Putting that shade up will help minimize that jump in temperature. So that can really help go a long way, especially as we start getting into heat sensitive plants and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And then being able to pull it back at night, maybe for a day or two and then put it back. That's really important. So I would not sleep on the power of that for your garden. The time for pure shade is, for a summer plant is really, when I say pure shade, I mean like shading like in the middle of the day, not all the time shade, has really passed for right now, and probably until next year, but it's still something that needs to be at top of mind. And as we are still planting for fall, it's really important to put that shade up. So don't forget about that, whatever you do, because one hot day can ruin a seedling that's not meant for heat. But one hot day of shade on top can really help a seedling thrive. Yeah, I felt like that was going to come out clever, and it didn't.
I kind of saw it on your face, but it's true.
You saw me thinking that?
It's still solid,
Yeah.
A good example is spinach. For me in Chicago, this is when you're listening to this as a kind of new episode, this is a good time to plant out spinach. And I know that there's still places that are far too warm for that. I'm not going to add shade to my plantings. That's not my plan. But there's some areas that something like spinach, which again is probably one of the more sensitive crops when it comes to heat. It could save your harvest if you want to get it planted out there.
Absolutely.
I guess I should say direct sowed in most cases. I know some folks do transplant some of that stuff, but that can make a difference, keeping that area just a little bit cooler. I was in a garden center because that's what I do, especially when I have this lull that I'm in for this time of year. And it's so funny because it was you in my head, right? So I walked, it was one of the big box home improvement stores. So I walked from inside of the store from outside to inside of the store to the kind of indoor, outdoorish part of the garden center. So technically it's outdoors and they have shade up. And I said, oh, shoot, look at how much cooler this space is right under this shade. And then you walk, 20 feet over to where, they have most times they'll have the dirt against the far end of the buildings. Yeah. At least that's how they are here. And that's kind of exposed to all of the elements. And I'm like, another temperature shift. And it was like quite literally the first time I could feel what we talk about when it comes to shade.
Yeah.
And those, I always just kind of ignore it because it's that moment of like all these shade plants. I really don't have any room for like, flowers that, prefer shady areas. So I'm zipping through that area all the time. But for whatever reason, I was moving a bit slower that day. And I'm like, there it is.
And you were thinking to yourself, I need to get back under that shade.
Yeah. It was humid. sunny everywhere else besides that space. I mean, and I'm talking like not I walked from outside and then walked into air conditioning. It wasn't that, but it was absolutely noticeably different.
Yeah. I mean, it's not going to change the way, be like, oh, I need to put a jacket on. Well, not this time of year, but it absolutely does make a difference. So I would really recommend people still have that on their radar. And I mean, you brought up spinach, and honestly, like for me this time of year, shade can mean germinating or not germinating. End of story. So if I don't put the shade out, those seeds won't pop. And that's really an issue for me. So it's another tool in your toolbox, and it's something that you really want to try to avoid, because the other thing we have to think about too is as we get a little bit more into September, it starts to cool. We need to start adjusting our watering too. Mm-hmm. So you may not need to water as much as you have previously. I usually water every 3 days now, I believe. And I just, because I'm watering infrequently, if it rains, I don't even adjust. I just let it be extra water. But I'll go to every 4 days to every 5 days. I'll start dwindling down how much I'm watering, because the less heat you have, and you're probably going to get more rain as the seasons change, then the less evaporation you have, that soil will stay longer, and it won't use it up. So adjust your watering, because last thing we want to do is rot our roots, especially if you're doing container gardening.
Agreed. And there's also still room for disease to set in. Think about if you're in that mixture of what you do for watering, rains, and even slightly cooler temps. So those plant leaves may not have the best opportunity to dry off before night sets.
Yeah.
And those temperatures for us, I mean, these temps are dropping by 10 degrees from the high to the low. And, that next morning, is that dew on the plants, or is that still water from yesterday?
Yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, you definitely don't want it to be sitting there wet all the time, because now you're going all the way back and inviting disease, and you're going to have to start pulling plants. Mm-hmm. And disease can be a really big problem this time of year, too, for that exact reason. It could be a major issue.
Agreed.
So, what's the next one? So, not adjusting watering. It's pretty self-explanatory. Not planting for fall. So, you may think like, oh, well, my time's up. It's absolutely not. You can be direct sowing for fall. We've talked a lot about starting seeds, inside, outside, whatever, to transplant. Now we're specifically talking about like, hey, it's time to start direct sowing certain seeds, because you're running out of time real quick to get things nice and comfortable for the frost.
Yeah, I went to, this is like mid-August. I did my rounds. They're probably about maybe a half a dozen or so. Let's make it even. Places that I shop at for flowers, for veggie starts. And the flowers at maybe 4 out of 6 of them were pretty crappy. Basically they're just getting the mums in the Midwest. There's some sunflowers maybe, and the corn stalks, they haven't come in yet, but we're very close to seeing nothing but Halloween stuff in the stores. Veggie starts, ornamental stuff. So at this point, for me in my area, whatever I'm going to grow, it's going to be from the little starts that I have, or it's going to be direct sowed. Yeah. Right? Like I don't have options from go out and shop. I know some of y'all do. And that's okay. I think that, I have adjusted my vision for my fall plan, what I have in the planter app. I have to adjust it. I'm on I think this is version 5 of my 2024 plan, documented version 5. And that's okay, because there's still plenty of things that I can grow that I'll enjoy for the fall.
Well, not really on our list at all, but I mentioned this in a video on YouTube the other day. Not being fluid, being able to change your gardening plan if needed, that can be another issue too. I may not have to do that. I'm waiting about a week before I figure it out. But, planting time is nigh. I've got My seedlings they were set back this year. So some stuff is on track. Some stuff's not. And that's just my fault from playing around with different techniques and stuff like that. Lesson learned, let me tell you. Wait for that episode. This is going to be you might as well just be me doing a monologue because I've got a lot of lessons I learned this year. But, it's one of those things where if something's not working out in your garden and you need to change the layout or where things go, like be able to do that. Yeah. Because you definitely don't want to be so rigid that you just like box yourself in. I've had that problem before, and it's really an issue. It's a major issue. And also I just went out and seeded rutabaga today. I direct sowed some. So there is, I'm a little bit on track with that one so far. Yeah.
So for me, the spoiler is, unless there's like some huge guarantee of a whole nother month of non-freezing temps here in Chicago, which I've not seen as long as I've been tracking it, I am likely to not have any heading crops, which is a real disappointment for fall. Yeah. So this was a summer mistake, just based on the time it was made. I put my seedlings that I direct seeded indoors. They brought them outside almost immediately. They germinated, and I somehow thought it was a bright idea to put them in the shadiest bed. Like I sat the seedlings in the shadiest bed in my garden, and it took me about a week and a half to realize they're just growing so slow. It seems it's always slower than you want. I realized like how little sun they get. Now that bed grows plenty of great food, but when it comes to I was already like 3 weeks behind. I had started a round, they died. This is my second round that I started. And I'm like, these things are never going to size up. Like I would need full seedlings, 3 or 4 true leaves to be planting them right now. And even when I plant them, I know that they're going to grow faster than they would in their little seedling cup. It's just, it's not going to be enough time. I'm pretty confident of. And I could just say, all right, toss it. Like, don't worry about it at all. Yeah. Or I can plant some things that are super quick growing, and by plant, I mean, direct sow. There's some things that are super quick growing that I will still enjoy.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's where I sit too. I'm looking at seedlings now. It's going to be a close call. It's going to be real close, maybe too close for comfort. I'm probably going to have to employ some coverings this year to really ensure that I get a harvest. But it's, it's fine. It is what it is. But moving forward, like I know that I started these seeds in anticipation. For instance, my lettuce, my bok choy, my rutabaga. I think that's all I had off the top of my head that I was going to start inside and direct sow. So even though the ones that I started, they're not ready yet, I can still direct sow now and get them going, and then be able to come out and and plant the other ones when they're ready. And kind of, instead of having them like staggered, it may be more so ready at once, but at least I'll have them in the ground. And, that's just because part of me wants to just look at it and be like, well, screw it. It ain't going to work. I'm just going to throw the crap out. But I don't really want to do that because that's not practicing what I preach. And, I'm trying to really focus on being like very fluid, being able to adjust on the fly if I need to. And sometimes you just don't recognize until it's over, until the last minute that like, hey, you know what, this really isn't going to work. And being able to change that. So especially when it comes to fall planting, because there's a lot of moving parts. So we looked at it today. I was recording a video about sweet potatoes. And when I was done, I was looking at it and I was like, okay. I was like, dude, you've got like 3 beds planted right now out of the 7 functional beds. I was like, it's time to kind of get something going. And I'm standing out there and I'm dripping sweat. It's so hot. And then you're just like, but this is when you direct sow. You know what I mean? And part of me, I almost wanted to go ahead and like try and direct sow some broccoli and see how that would work. I've always wanted to do that for fall just to see. And I don't know. I may this week go out and do that just to see how it works out, especially looking at the state of the plants that I have here. It may be worth a shot. I don't know yet. You know what I mean? So I'm just trying to kind of feel that out and see how it works. But I've got a couple days to figure it out.
You sound like me most of this year.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see, I hope you do that. I'd love to see how that works out. Broccoli is, I think it's actually one of the faster producers in the right conditions, but that's the battle, right? So I was doing the math, and I think it's something like, when I was considering, is broccoli a no-go for me? When I was thinking about this, it was something like 10 weeks of typically frost-free weather. So that's what I was looking at. And I said, in 10 weeks, if I had a proper seedling to transplant in, I'd have went for it. But when I have just the beginning of the first true leaf, I'm just like, and I have some containers that are open. Maybe I'll dump them in there. One of the things I found is that it wasn't that I didn't pull plants when necessary. It was more of, I underestimated some of my summer plants and how long they would take to produce.
Yeah.
And so some of that also ties back to me wanting to get a second or a third planting in for some of the summer things. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, you're just starting to produce the thing. And now I'm hoping that it will produce for, the summer crop. And I basically jammed up my space for the fall crop.
So I'm looking at it, and I know we just did the days to harvest episode. And what did we land? Do you remember what we landed on, if germination time's included in that?
We were split. You believe that it is.
Okay.
And I believed that I could agree with you, but I erred on the side of it's not.
So let me just say, if let me just go your method and your belief and say it is not. So let's say 7 days to germination, right? Mm-hmm. If I start it this Wednesday, that'll give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to 10 weeks of no frost. That'll bring me up to 10 weeks, which is 70 days until the frost, which means if I direct sow Wednesday, I may be able to, I'm going to do it.
Let's do it, man.
I'm going to do it, everybody. I'm doing it. This is it. I've wanted to do it for years, and I think I want to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You said you're going to do it. Then you said you think you're going to do it. And I said, let's do it. And by that, I mean you. Let's you do this. So we didn't cover off on this during the episode. And I forget the placement. This is probably a couple of weeks ago. You guys heard that. Thanks for listening. The problem, I'm more conservative than young Ben is about all of these things. And so the problem with my approach is, if I'm saying that it's not included in the time to harvest, so your package says 70 days, and I'm saying, nope. It actually, it's 77 days from now. That will lead me likely to not give it a try. Right? So it will encourage me to say, oh, I don't have enough time. Whereas if I take your approach, the benefit is that I'm getting it into the ground, but the risk is that it doesn't produce. And I always look at it to say, I'd rather have the crop that didn't quite make it. Now I have more data, than not at all. Well, and
you have to remember this too. I've harvested broccoli in December and January before. And I've also had broccoli hold over all the way until the next spring. So even though I have that many weeks until my last frost date, I know that frost is not going to kill, especially a 70-day-old plant. In theory, it should be almost ready to harvest by the frost. So I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I got let's see, what do I have that I'm gonna plant? I'll tell you. I got Waltham broccoli, available in the seed shop, and I've got flat Dutch cabbage available in the seed shop. And I've got pak choi available in the seed shop. So I'll do all of those and see how they go. The pak choi, I think it may be a little bit too early. It's still too warm. But everything else, I've always had this thought. This is taking a left turn. But I've always had this thought that, it's meant to be direct sowed and for fall. I've always had that thought. So pray for me, everybody. let's hope that we have some success with that. But I still have my seedlings that are going, they're already 3-4 weeks ahead. So I can still put those in a couple weeks, but it should be interesting. I think that it'll be interesting to see which one's stronger too. The direct sowed or the transplants.
Yeah, and I had planned on doing that for a couple of different crops and never got to it. And I believe, I'm not certain I would have heading crops if I would have done both the direct sowing and the starting in seed trays. But I'm inclined to think I would have. So if you're still in a place and space where you have time to do both, boy, do I encourage you to do both. I probably encourage you mostly to get the seed in the ground, ground being whatever your garden space is, if you have to lean on one or the other. Yeah.
Wednesday is the day. This Wednesday, I'm going to do it. So
yeah, it's my calendar to check with you.
Yeah. If you're on, if you go to YouTube, you'll see it way before this episode comes out, but you'll see the conception of it. You'll hear the conception of it here, and it'll be backwards. Let's just put it that way. But not planting for fall clearly is a mistake because now we're taking it to a new level. But along with not planting for fall is not fertilizing for fall. And that even goes for this time of year. I mean, I just sat here and told you that I have 70 days until my last frost date. So what does that look like? 70 days in a garden. 70 days looks like another round of squash, another round of zucchini, could possibly put in potatoes. All of my fall plants can go in. They all need to be fed. And so it's really important, but you can't feed them all the same. You've got to, we've got to feed summer plants like summer plants and fall plants like fall plants.
Yeah, September
really
is the last month that I generally will apply fertilizer. That includes, most of my summer plants are winding down. So that next month in October, I'm like, they're done. They're either pulled or they're not producing anymore. Like there's no new production there. That's one of the reasons. The fall plantings just got fertilizer. And basically, in either August or September. So that's about it. Because if you look at my area, I don't have kind of any type of winter protection for these plants. Not yet. It's now on the new 5-year plan. 10-year plan? 10-year plan. We're coming up on a 10-year plan, which I have like 2 years left on.
Well, you better hurry the hell up.
But because, and I point out that they don't have any type of protection, what's growing will basically almost come.
This message comes from our sponsor, Teladoc Health. There are lots of reasons for wanting to be healthy. Family, work, living a fuller life. Teladoc Health understands. Whether you have diabetes, high blood pressure, or just need to manage your weight, Teladoc Health can help. Visit teladochealth.com/what'syourwhy for more information. That's TELADOC health/what'syourwhy.
To a halt. I'm going to call it October. I could be off by a couple of weeks. But by the time you get to, the end of October, beginning of November, there's no new growth for mostly anything in my garden. Everything is just basically like, the grocery store now.
It's interesting. Ever since the past 5 minutes that I've decided to direct sow for fall, a flurry of things has entered my mind. And so you start talking about fertilizing. I have this rogue raccoon that I'm going to get his ass. I'm telling y'all, but I can't fertilize like I normally do. So I've got to find something different to put in the ground that's a higher nitrogen for these plants. So I'm going to have to adjust that. And then I'm going to have, I'm literally going down our list, everybody. And then I'm going to, once I sow those seeds and I get them to germinate, I'm going to have to go back and then add shade to those seedlings to keep them, nice and moist because they won't have big root systems. So I have to do that. And that's the difference between putting out a transplant and then putting in a seed is the transplant's already got loads of roots. I mean, in comparison, otherwise it's like I've got one root that I've got to keep moist. You don't have a lot of margin for error on that. So I'm going to have to do that. And then when it comes to adjusting the water, that's luckily for me, that's not really as difficult because of the state of my garden right now, where I have a lot of beds that are open. That means that the only thing that doesn't need to be watered much is my sweet potatoes, and I can just turn the water off on that one bed, which is why I decided to go with this in-ground system. The corn still needs a lot of water, so I can continue to water that as much. And I may actually have to up my watering for right now while I have seeds in there, so I'll probably end up doing that. But the fertilizer is going to be a tricky one, because the fertilizer that I typically use is not high nitrogen. Usually what I do is I put in this fertilizer. It's like like an 8-10, or probably like an 8-10-8 or something like that. And I really need to get like a 12-8-8 or something to get in the ground. Typically what I do is I use the other fertilizer and then I put in blood meal, but the blood meal is like a magnet for mammals. So I can't add that right now. So I have to start thinking about that. I'm in a very little time, because I'm going to do a pre-planting fertilizer with those seeds. So once I put them in, I'll put the pre-planting fertilizer in, and then I have some on hand. So a month later, I can give it more fertilizer. So just try to keep it going. I want to push that growth as fast as possible. So yeah, I've got I just gave myself a lot of work. And then I got 7 days to get shade in place, which means I got to build shade structures. So yeah, it just opened up a whole world for me of like new gardening tasks, which I'm not very thrilled about now that I've thought about it and spoken it out loud, but it may be a good time to do that.
It'll be really nice to have some broccoli come November, December. I've
never harvested broccoli when it's supposed to be harvested in the fall. Never. Not one time.
Later.
It's always been like way later. I'm sitting here watching like, okay, we've got broccoli growing, but it's going to be okay, everybody. It's going to be there, I'm telling you. And then it's like half of it goes with a bad frost, half of it stays, half of it's small, half of it's normal. It's a nightmare. So why not, with this year, with everything that's happened in my garden, with everything that I've tried, just do one more to see if we can just ruin the whole garden year or go out with a huge bang. What do you think is going to happen? And I don't want to hear the ushy gushy. It's going to be all good. I want to know what you think is going to happen, because you look at my weather more than I do. I'm convinced. Yeah. I'm talking about you, Batavia.
Well, no, I realized when you said looking at the weather, I knew you were talking to me there.
Yeah. So what do you think is going to happen?
So you're at 100% success for your spring broccoli. 100% of the plants that you planted produced a head that you all enjoyed. I think that I like that you've chosen broccoli as opposed to cabbage, because you've had success with that year over year over year. I think that your bigger struggle is you'll have success, but your bigger struggle is going to be the temperature that broccoli tolerates. Right. So you get, not a whole lot of below 32 degree Fahrenheit days. But this will probably be one of the first experiences of like, this plant will be in a different growth stage. So you're talking about 70-degree day old broccoli. Does it have a head? Does it not have a head yet? So I think that I could see you having your shade structure, but I could also see you like not really wanting to add any kind of heat protectant, so to speak, so, puts the plastic over it to protect it from the colder nights. So I think that's going to be a stumbling block if there is one.
50 to 85 degrees for germination for broccoli. So I'm right on that high end cusp. We'll be teetering over it, but I think a little bit of shade will help with that. Be interesting to see. I appreciate that, because I agree with you. I can foresee all of that being something. I will tell you that I won't feel the desire to put plastic on it until, almost December. We may have to put it on like once, but for the most part, like it should be good. I just looked up cabbage, 45 to 85 degrees. So that's going to be another issue as well. So we'll see how that goes. What was another one that I said?
Well, you look up that broccoli plants will usually tolerate temperatures as low as 26 degrees with little damage. And I think we talked about like kind of the long season plants and, temperatures and all a couple of episodes back, probably a number of episodes back. But words like usually and tolerate, little damage, like that's all important when it comes to those kind of, clues.
Tolerate doesn't mean like.
No. Well, it definitely doesn't mean like. Doesn't mean,
I can tolerate a punch in the face, but it doesn't do me very good. You know what I mean?
And also usually you can tolerate a punch in the face. Sometimes you just completely collapse. Yeah.
And it's really important. I mean, that's a really important statement you just said, because if you think about it and I don't know how it works with plants, but let's say your plant's having a bad day and it gets to 90 degrees. Maybe it's just like, screw it, I'm done. And then it just gives up. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot there. I think there's a lot more there than we had anticipated. So we're going to find out though.
Yeah, I think it's still, especially because you said you had like 4 beds that are available for planting. I definitely think it's worth it. We don't have this on our list, but not taking the chance. Right. I think that's something that we run into, and I'm going to fold it in as, a mistake going into fall.
I'm glad I got these new glasses with what you just sent me. Oh, I'm sorry.
You absolutely run into the, better luck next year, like don't pack up your tent yet, guys and gals, and this, I think for me, at least the way that I manage things, this is the way I justify some things. If it ends up being a fail, again, at least I have a data point now, right? And so I feel pretty good about, like, that seems like it's in conflict with the heading crops. I'm just looking for, there's some things that I didn't grow at all this year that I still have an opportunity to grow and enjoy. I keep on saying it, hit the buzzer. Like, that's really important to me. I'm not just looking to grow food this fall.
Have I sent you this before?
I don't think so.
What you just sent me? But this is super weird. Batavia sends me this thing, which I'm going to read out loud for everybody.
No, of course,
as I know Batavia loves that. But it's from North Carolina, from the county I live in. She's a freak, y'all. Just so you know. But I love it. So it says, this is really important because I actually went on YouTube this year and basically, not knowing this existed, said these low temperatures, and it apparently is accurate, but it says broccoli plants will usually tolerate temperatures as low as 26 with little damage. Sudden changes in temperature can be more damaging. Remember that, everybody. Mm-hmm. For example, this is really important. For example, if several days of temperatures in the upper 60s or low 70s are followed by a plunge into the upper 20s, plants will be more severely damaged than if we had several days in the 40s or 50s with nighttime temps in the mid-20s. Do I need to read that again?
You don't, but I got teary-eyed when I read that.
That hits hard. So whenever I come on here and everybody's always joking, it's a heartbreak zone. I'm telling y'all, I'm trying not to cuss, but it's so damaging to the plant. It's so difficult. It says also, if plants have been heavily fertilized with nitrogen, which encourages lush, tender growth, will be more heavily damaged by cold than those fertilized at light to moderate levels. So this really mirrors what we've been talking about for so long, is like, there's not just a one size fits all for fertilizer. There's a technique to the fertilization. I can smell an episode brewing that Batavia hates. So it's really important that you know what you're putting into your ground, and you're not just pushing growth when they're the most vulnerable. So this really hits right now. I'm glad that I saw this because, one, it just kind of reinforces what I already thought. But 2, it also really helps me to understand that, like, when those temperatures are fluctuating highly, that we really need to be careful. And it just goes back to what we said in the beginning, like, remove that shade, add that shade, because you could get those days in the 60s or 70s and 20s at night. But if you put that shade on there, now you can keep it at 50s, because in the fall, you can keep it even cooler. So it can be 50s to 20s, and it just says here, with several days in the 40s or 50s, night times in the 20s are not as bad. So this all is super important.
The key here, so when I first read really the answer where we were in the episode, this is the temperature. And so this was what do you think about, what does Batavia think about the success you're going to have? That answered the mail. But the next sentence, I literally read that and thought heartbreak zone. And then the example of 60s to 70s, which you probably are going to dip to get to the 30s more so than you would the upper 20s coming from 60s or 70s.
Yes.
But it's along the same realm. And the reason why, I'll be honest, I saw it was an extension service. And so I deemed it valid. I didn't, and so I put the link into the chat. I didn't realize it was North Carolina. So it's just coincidence. But they speak of this in the way that you and I talk. Right. So it's not often that people are giving, especially on these official sites, examples like that. That makes it real. Saying sudden temperature changes. That's still kind of general.
Very general and unhelpful.
Yeah. 70 degrees dropping down to 55. That's a temperature change to our bodies oftentimes. It's in Chicago, we have a thing you leave with a winter coat just in case. You don't know what the weather's going to be like. It could be 70 degrees later that day. But shoot, it was 40 when you left the house. That's different. But no, they're telling you a 40 to 50 degree swing can be more damaging than something that, started off in the 50s and dropped down to the same low. That's critical.
Now, and I will tell you this, when it comes down to the wire, it says 60s, low 70s. Here, it'll be 70s to 80s. And then down into the 30s, which is, again, that's a 50-degree change. So it's funny. I never thought about this. It's another thing that I'm going to be trying this year is keeping shade on through the fall, to try and minimize those temperature swings. I never thought about that. I never did. I always looked at it oh, great, it's going to be 80 degrees a day. Cool, the plants will take it. But maybe that's just not the case. So we need to, I think I'm going to move forward with that one.
Yeah, and I think in that bit that last couple of sentences is from the same article. I think that this article specifically talks about broccoli. That's one of those uniquely sensitive crops. Generally speaking, that idea for fall crops going from 60s to 70s down to the 20s, you'll look at could be more damaging across many cool weather crops compared to going from 50 where they can live and thrive to 20. That same idea is true. I think the impact for broccoli will probably be worse, hence the point here. But there's a code that has been cracked there, so to speak.
Yeah. And it's, I agree with you. All plants, I think, can benefit from this. I mean, will it kill it? No, but it'll shock it. And what happens when a plant gets shocked? It stops growing. So, that's, it's very interesting. So there you go, everybody. We're going to do that. And I'm going to also be using the Planter app to guide me through this. And, it's a supporter of the show. It's a sponsor. And we're proud to have it as a sponsor because it is a great app. Batavia's already referenced it this show. We need to start dinging the bell when it's referenced because every show it comes up because it's such a pinnacle point, such an important part of our gardens and what helps us move forward in this. So if you use the link below, you'll get a discount code or a discount applied to your membership to it. It's already cheap. It's a great deal. Helps you plan your gardens. Very visual. You can use it on multiple devices, and it's available in your Google and App Store. I love using it on my PC, and I'm looking forward to using it to see how my broccoli will play. And what I mean by play is being combative or companion against the squash that's in the bed I want to put it in. I have no idea off the top of my head, but I know when I put it into that plant, it will tell me right off the bat with a green or a red dot. And if there's no dot, it doesn't matter. So check it out. That's the Planter app, the Planter app, and you can get it at the Google and Apple Play Store. All right. Question of the day.
Question of the day. Oh,
this
wait.
comes up.
Harvest those foods. Harvest.
Yeah, just keep harvesting. Don't stop. All right. Kaylee asks.
Hey, Kaylee.
She's on point today, everybody. says, "Hi, friends. I've been loving your fall season podcast, and they're getting me so excited for the third season. This past fall, I planted garlic, but through late January and February, my area experienced record warm temperatures, and the garlic grew considerably. Once the temperatures dropped again, the garlic died off and did not rebound in the spring. My question is, do you have any recommendations to help with this issue? Thanks to you both. The gardening community wouldn't be the same without you."
Hey.
Thank you, Kaylee. That's very nice of you. Well, Kaylee, I think we've already answered that question in this episode, but garlic is one of those that we always think is indestructible. But as we've just found out, thanks to the great state of North Carolina and the Extension Service, these temperature swings can be damaging to plants. We're going to pretend like we never read it before, so I'm just kidding. I'm not going to read it again. But I mean, look, garlic has always been one of those things in my mind where, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, Batavia, but I never thought I had to cover it.
Agreed. I didn't either.
And when I say cover, I mean not cover it on the show. I mean like cover it for season extension purposes, stuff like that, protection. But I can tell you that when I lived in New England, we planted garlic. We left it in the ground. It got below zero. Wasn't an issue, but it never really got warm. Here, it's very common. Well, I plant my garlic in November. In December, I've already got it coming up out of the ground. Mm-hmm. I think probably putting some plastic over it on like really cold night. It's one of those things where we just read it based on your climate, not what the book tells us the plant can handle. Let's look at it that way from now on. I think that's a much healthier way to look at it, don't you?
Yeah, I agree. I think that, and I've read basically in early winter, I see posts about, hey, my garlic has already started to sprout and I can see the green stalks, the green leaves, is this a problem? And in a lot of cases, folks say it's fine. But in Kaylee's experience, she's like, nah, it never recovered. Right. And so for me, and I've only grown garlic a handful of years, and I think it's 4 years and 3 of them have been successful. This is probably the smallest harvest I've had from garlic, but that's another conversation. We'll talk about that in a future episode. But when it comes to my area, once I get it planted, it's not coming back up. But again, that goes back to my fall and winter temps. I'm planting garlic pretty much after my first frost, which means that's actually counter to what I said about things not growing, because there are roots being established underneath. I just can't see them. Remember I said by the time I get to October, nothing's growing. Yeah, they're establishing, because otherwise they would rot over the winter. But they're not growing enough where they're popping up above the soil line. And so for me in my area, I've not had the concern with Kaylee. And while things came up earlier this spring, it was still, cool enough, and the weather was accommodating to that garlic. But I have a feeling there are going to be more and more experiences like Kaylee if
what our problem is happen. As a society, we read too much and do too little. And what I mean by that is, like, we all know that garlic is a bulb. You plant it in the fall. We know what we read, and that it can take super cold temperatures. And it's just like with this whole thing that I'm now apparently signed up to do about direct sowing for fall, like other crops that you normally wouldn't do. And I'm excited about it because I'm tired of reading about it. I want to do it. I want to see what it's going to do, because that's how I learn. And Kaylee now knows that when you get those record warm temperatures that you could possibly see again, I mean, we're going back into a La Nina, so we shouldn't have that issue as prevalent. It should be a cooler winter overall. I don't give a crap what the Farmer's Almanac says. I'm going to say that out loud. But your climate still has fluctuations. And even if the garlic can handle sub-zero temperatures, if you stay in the 50s and go sub-zero, no matter what, it's gonna suffer. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. If Batavia comes to my house in the summertime, she's going to be hotter and uncomfortable here than she is at her house, because she just stated that she was wearing a cashmere sweater the other day, or a look-alike. Now, if you walk outside here with a cashmere sweater at the same time, you're going to wish you were dead when you walked outside. You know what I mean? So it's your climate that you're in. If you're going to get record warm temperatures, like, I'm trying to think of how to explain this. If you're mild climate right now, and let's say you stay 40s, 50s during the winter, 20s at night, then you know that you need to, and you're going to get into the 70s, 80s maybe. You may get a freak 80-degree day. Shade it, right? We've already said that. But if you know you're going to get like super cold and you're going to get, down into the single digits, because, it can happen. We do have perennial planting zones for a reason. They do tell us what our average lowest low temperature can be. If you think you're going to meet that temperature or even go below it, because that is possible, cover it with plastic. That's why we always leave a bed and a plastic in place. I may only use it 3 times a year, but it's in place. The one thing I don't have that I'll leave in place is shade, but maybe that needs to change. I have not experienced my garlic not rebounding. It's always rebounded, but I could see that being an issue if you got like a crazy hot day and then going all the way down to cold at night.
So when is the plastic going on?
If it's going to get really cold.
Okay.
At night. Like you're going to get,
after
every
it's
year,
sprouted?
I would say no matter what, personally, if it's colder than normal for you and you're worried about it, go for it. You know what I mean?
Because when I was listening to read Kaylee's comment, I thought basically it came up prematurely, and then that next bout of cold knocked it back, and then it never kind of, in the natural progression of things, recovered.
Well, and the other thing too is plant later. We typically, I think you said it earlier, you plant after your first frost.
Yeah.
I plant after my first frost.
The ground is still workable. Yeah.
The ground is still easily workable. It's probably mildly warm outside when I do it. And for me, again, climate, for me, mildly warm it might be 65 degrees, and it's usually late in the afternoon, and I'll go out and plant it. But I usually try and plant it later in the season. When most people are like, the garden's done, that's when I go out and I plant my garlic at that point. So, and that will help minimize the premature, I just went teenager on myself, the premature growth on that. So you won't, it won't cause it to shoot up those green stalks. But if they do, just mulch it too. Mulching will protect it too. Especially from like frost heaving and stuff like that.
Yeah, the first year that I didn't have garlic grow at all after I had planted it. I didn't mulch those beds at all. So I planted the garlic bulbs or, the cloves. I don't know, maybe, November or something. Didn't put any cover whatsoever over the beds, and they did not do much of anything that next spring. I can't remember if it rotted or if they just didn't sprout. But I remember digging up some of the garlic cloves, which were intact. So most of them must have not rotted. But either way, I attribute it to one of two things: a bad run of garlic, or, again, I didn't provide it the proper insulation.
Yeah. Yeah, and see, for me, I've got to pre-chill my garlic. That makes a big difference. So I put it in the refrigerator in September, and I won't pull it out until November when I want. So that guarantees me the chill time that garlic needs, which can make it come up earlier. But like I said, just mulch it heavy and you'll be fine. I usually mulch it heavy, and then to top it off, I don't even water it through the winter, really. I just let nature take its course.
The same thing. I water it that first time when I'm planting it, and I don't water it again until we get to the next year. Yeah.
So there you go. So Kaylee, that's what we would do. I'd be interested to see at what point around your first frost you actually did plant it, if it was before or after, and just make that adjustment. But if you'd like to be like Kaylee and send us a question, you can do so on bygquestion@gmail.com. There is a link below for that, or you can just simply go join our Facebook page, Backyard Gardens Community Garden, and make sure you write in the beginning question of the day if you'd like for it to be answered on the air. But just note, any question that's on there is susceptible to be answered on the air. So, are you going to make any of these mistakes, Batavia?
Is the answer yes if I've already bathed them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's natural to make mistakes, you know. I've been gardening a long time, and I still make all these mistakes, at least one or two of them every year, at least. And it's natural. I'd like to think that at some point I would stop being so stubborn and actually get it right. But I don't know if it's possible. I know myself too well.
And I've learned to know you as well. It's impossible.
Do you want to hear my announcement?
Absolutely.
I'm not growing onions next year. And on that note, everybody, remember, check out all of our links, buy some seeds from us. We would love to have them. Have you grow some of our seeds, become a patron, subscriber, all that good stuff. Get yourself the planner app. And remember, we're going to learn to grow and grow for change.
See ya.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Well, we hope you enjoyed the show, and thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so by checking out our seed shop below. We have all kinds of seeds available for you, and we're going to be adding new seeds shortly, so check that out. Get yourself some seeds. It's free shipping, over $35 orders. So go ahead, get a full garden. What are you waiting for? Order your seeds and stock up. Or you can become a subscriber. You can either be an Apple subscriber or a patron, and that will help support the show. You'll get one free episode every month, an extra episode, that is. So we definitely would love to see you over there and become part of our crew. Join the Backyard Gardens Community Garden in Facebook. That's free. Go ahead, join that, and join the community where all the listeners get together and they can help each other out with their trials and tribulations and just show off their gardens. There's not a better way to do it. And if you're curious about what's going on in our gardens, you can check out our individual YouTube channels. So I'm at Sandy Bottom Homestead, and Batavia is at Be Better Garden. You can check that out and see how each of us are growing and what we talk about on those, because a lot of times we will coincide with the podcast and help add information in that maybe we didn't get out in the show or we feel that's pertinent at a certain time of year. So check that out and enjoy seeing our gardens and what we do in them. And we have an Amazon store which has all the products that we use and recommend in our gardens, and it helps support our show. And we also add to this list periodically, so be sure to check it out periodically to see if there's anything that you need for your garden. Everything that you do, including a like and a subscribe and even a review, will help us learn to grow and grow for change.
See ya.